Okay, so I'm going to read a few that are all kind of the same question, and then I'll speak to them. Daniel Monteith says, "Do failures often become emotional? And if so, what is your advice on moving forward?" Kay Morton says, "Are any failures that you managed to recover and make into something positive, even if it was not exactly the thing that you planned?" That's actually a really nice thing to bookmark. Um, has there any been SP Productions? Have there been projects that have frustrated you to the point of walking away, and have you yet to bring yourself back to it? Um, so there is no amount of expertise that will allow you to avoid failing. There's just none. And there's no point at which it'll stop happening. That's, you just resolve yourself to that. Like, you're going to keep screwing up. You're going to screw up in different ways. You're going to get better at screwing up. And by better at screwing up, I mean you'll see the screw ups coming from farther away, sometimes just 1 extra inch from farther away, but that's a lot. So, in my history of making, the Godhead, the Valhalla, was for me always the Industrial Light and Magic model shop. I'd been reading about it since I'd been 10 years old and saw the first Cinefantastique about Star Wars. And as soon as I knew that people did that for a living, I wanted to work with those people. I tried to work in special effects in New York. I worked for Peter Wallach Enterprises and a few other places. I tried to work in special effects in San Francisco. And it didn't work for several years until I got hired by Jamie Heineman at Colossal Pictures Model Shop. And what's funny is when you're first starting out making stuff and you succeed at an aesthetic challenge, it's crazy exciting. It's crazy exciting. It feels like you've cured cancer for yourself. There's a way in which that early stage aesthetic excursion that we make as makers, and you achieve this satisfactory interaction with the thing that you're making. It feels incredible. And you take that out into the world and you're like, I would like to work in this industry, right? So all of my early sculptures looked like movie props. They looked like MacGuffins. They looked like pieces of cinematic history. So it was a natural for me to think that I was ready to go work in the film industry. And reader, I was not, because most of the challenges that you'll encounter in a job are not aesthetic. They're engineering challenges, they're personnel challenges, they're materials and schedule challenges. If you do all those challenges really, really good, every now and then you get some aesthetic challenges. It's like there's a corollary on that 90% of every job ever is drudgery. And if you do the drudgery really good, you get about 10% of the time you get to do some really fun shit. So I worked for Jamie for about 5 years, and I started to meet model makers like Mike Wick, Christine Ells, who worked in other places like Skellington and CWI and other local Bay Area shops. And then, let's see, I moved from Colossal Pictures to Zoob, and I was a director of R&D for Zoob for about 18 months. And then I realized I needed to go back to making stuff for a living. And that's when I started hammering away at ILM. I had started calling Mark Anderson, who ran the shop at ILM. And eventually I got a hold of him, and eventually I got in and I started working I worked on the last 6 months, I think, 5 months of episode 1. And a couple things. One was, as soon as I got to ILM, I realized I was ready. But that I hadn't been ready until I got there. Seriously, it took a year and a half working in manufacturing and the toy industry as an augment to my previous special effects and model making experience to realize that here I was at ILM and my skill base was ready for what this place was going to offer me in terms of problems to solve. That was exciting to see that, to understand that professionally. Oh, here I am. That's awesome. That being said, almost every 3 days, I felt like someone was going to come up and tap me on the shoulder and tell me it's time for you to go. You clearly have no friggin' idea what you're doing. So that was the longest way of explaining the thing I said at the beginning. Is no amount of expertise will insulate you from failure. And it does get emotional and it does get dark. I take my failures really personally and get really mad about it. What was I machining for this? Oh, right. Okay, so I have this model I've been machining off camera just because it's a personal project and haven't been filming it because it's kind of almost too big. But I was machining some little tiny, tiny pockets in the side of aluminum, and I was using a very, very small milling bit. I think I was using something like, I think this was the one I was using. This is a 1/16 inch milling bit. And this is my last one because I broke its predecessor by just pushing a little too hard. And I was sitting here. This is literally like 2 days ago. I'm sitting here on the mill and I'm feeding the piece in, and I'm almost done. And I lapsed my focus. And I forgot to check in with my right hand, which was turning the dial and feeling the resistance, turning the hand crank and feeling the resistance. And I turned just a little too fast, chipped and shattered the 16th inch milling bit. And I got really mad instantly. I like this. Then what are you going to do? You going to stay mad at your mill? Am I going to stay mad at my mill? Oh, I have certainly done that, reader. But at this stage, I know that it's a process. So at ILM, I started to realize, oh, wow, this feeling of imposter syndrome that I don't belong here occurs on everything I'm going to do here. Every project I'm being given, at some point during that project, I will feel like I have no idea what the hell is going on. And it's usually immediately preceded by having screwed something up. Like I did a big vacuum form and then I boned it and I have to do it again. Or I laser cut something and it didn't work the way I intended it to. There's a Buddhist phrase, which is, this is what's happening. And this is really important for me in terms of dealing with failures in the shop and dealing with things that don't work the way I want them to. This is a really important distinction. Things that don't work. It's not the things that don't work. It's things that don't work the way I want them to. COVID has actually taught me that one of the things I do, I've talked a lot about setting arbitrary deadlines because it helps me finish stuff. But it's also like arbitrary deadlines are almost a pathology for me. Like it'll be 4:15 and I'll have told my partner I was going to come home at 5 and I'll think, oh, 45 minutes. That's enough time to machine this thing that I want to do. I'm going to grab all the parts and start. This is such a recipe for like an emotional, like it's such a recipe for screwing something up. Like, oh, I'm going to take this short bit of time and try and cram as much into it as I can. And it's because I get shit done-itis. Like I seriously get an endorphin rush out of completing a project, putting the last screw in, finishing the last bit of the paint. And I want that rush all the time. And when I don't get it, or when I set up an arbitrary deadline and I don't get it, I get really pissed off about it. So my answer to all of those questions, sorry, my hearing is bugging me. My answer to all those questions is it's a process and it's going to happen. And the first thing about failure is to recognize that it's going to show up so that when it shows up, you're not like, what the hell is that doing here? Nate Jones. The topic of failure is often seen as an off-limits topic. But learning from other people's failures is a great way to prevent making the same blunders. What are some examples of other people's failures that taught you to avoid certain things? And what are some examples of don't do it this way that you can tell us? Okay, the topic of failure, it is an off-limits topic, but it's in a surreptitious way, it's an off-limits topic. Because we talk about it all the time. We talk like, God, teach people to fail. First of all, I think most of the time when we're talking about failure, we really mean iteration. We really mean it's just going to take a few tries before you get there. Each of those tries isn't a failure. It's just going down a branch and realizing it's not the right branch, and coming back to the tree trunk and moving up a little bit, and then taking another branch, and then, on and on and on. Where it's an off limits topic is in the very personal experience of it. Because I think you're right, Nate. I do think a lot of people don't look. I mean, it's the classic job interview thing. What are your greatest failures as an employee? Well, if anything, I'm a perfectionist. that when J.K. Rowling says, I submitted my book to 59 publishers before selling it, it's not a story about failure. It's a story about success with a little bit of delayed gratification. What are some examples of other people's failures that taught you? So you said that taught you to avoid certain things. Well, I had a mentor early on in model making, a man by the name of Mitch Romanowski, an amazing model maker. Everyone who worked with Mitch will tell you, complicated dude, some definite anger issues. Mitch is no longer with us, and I'm very sad about it because I'd love him to hear my encomium to him. He's literally one of the most brilliant model makers I've ever met, and he could do it all. He could mold it, cast it, animatronics. He could do the engineering. He could also do all the painting. I mean, it's just like he ran the shop at Skellington for Nightmare Before Christmas. All those tens and tens and tens of thousands of separate little pieces and bits and bobs that were all handmade to create Henry Selick and Tim Burton's vision was supervised by Mitch. And Mitch gave me lots of advice that ran disasters off of the pass. Because we were sitting there in a mentor-mentee relationship. He gave me advice or would say, do stuff. And if in my experience, this will screw up that way and that will screw up this way. And when I would find that matched to what he told me, I was really learning. But it's not. I mean, what are some examples of other people's failures that taught you to avoid certain things? See, I think that is a tinier category than we often admit. I mean, certainly, if you are removing a part from the top of your engine, you want to make sure you don't drop a screw into the carburetor, because then you're very plausibly going to have to pull your engine to get that screw out of one of the cylinders. I learned that by watching some television show many years ago. But I think that if I truncate your question, I get something more interesting. What are some examples of other people's failures that taught you? The people I have learned from the most have been the people that have been the most honest with me about their failings. Yeah, those have been the relationships in which I benefited the most from that person's experience, because they were willing to share with me both the highs and the lows. So we got to talk about this stuff more. You got to be. I just remember with one of my kids, we had some knockdown drag out when he was like 16, and he had screwed something up, but he didn't want to admit it. And if you have kids, you know that this can like end up being a real beast, right? Like he doubles down on the lie, and it's a lie, but you can't quite say you're positive it's a lie because you can't know the full state of reality. And you push on it. And at a certain point, it became really clear. And he admitted, like, yeah, I lied about, I can't even remember what it was, walking the dog, something like that. And I said, you got to realize it's so much less energy to own the screw up right away. Right away, fall on your sword. And then I literally said, repeat after me. My bad. I'm sorry. I screwed up. Those three phrases are like a mantra, and we should all practice them because we all screw up all the time. And the people that express it, the people I've been able to collaborate with over the years that I've been lucky enough to be able to work with, people like Laura Kampf and Simone and Sean Charlesworth and Norm and Will. And I mean, these are all people whose egos are not tied into the success of everything that they do. They're totally willing to talk about it. And that means the collaboration is really real. And it means that when you get to a difficult space, there's conversational room to talk about it.